It's how do I preserve the human community? How can we live together? Back to, it's about how we engage, how we talk to each other. So we should not adopt the individual approach. It's about adopting the community approach. And I think that is fundamental to understanding Islam, understanding nature, understanding society, understanding science, how we approach it. So these are some ways of how Islam teaches us how to deal with the human, how to employ science, how to employ that community lens of caring, of living in harmony with nature and not isolating us from nature or claiming that there's a pinnacle of perfection.
I saw this movie called Truth the other day with my family, name of the news agency. Oh, it was 60 Minutes and Dan Rather. And so they were talking about Bush, right? And then how he had, everything with his military service. And the whole thing became more, instead of about the actual story, right? And the truth of the matter, it became about everything around the story. And all the sensational about the people instead of the topic. And then to the point where like people were fired and everything was falling apart, right? So then people lost, it was more about how do you tear someone down, right? And then how do you discredit them versus just having an honest conversation. And I feel like that's part of it too, where it's like, it's not happening. Or maybe it is happening in the Muslim community, and I just don't see it, right, as much because it's not in the media and all of that. And so, I mean, I don't know. This is just other stuff that's making me think about why we need to do more of this science and Islam conversation.
Yeah, no, you brought up a very important point. I think what's lacking in our community and many communities around the world is lack of communication, honestly. Yeah. And lack of communication comes from ignorance, lack of and fear, and feeling uncomfortable. So you just shy away and you kind of crawl into your hole. And it takes courage and being comfortable with the uncomfortable, being comfortable with ambiguity, and being willing, humble to admit that you were wrong. I think those are some of the very important characteristics that is part of who we should be as Muslims. And actually, there are many places in the Quran that invite us to be skeptical and to be doubtful and to ask questions and it's okay to admit you were wrong. I think that's very important. I mean, the hadith that says that you get 2 rewards if you're right and you get 1 reward if you're wrong is a wonderful invitation to make mistakes. But we kind of somehow lost that along the way, and we became very centered around ourselves because of fear. And therefore, I think engaging with people around us, having an open conversation is very important. And that role modeling has to start young as well, in the household, right? With parents, how they talk together, how they talk with their children. At school, how teachers talk to the children and the students, and so on and so forth. It takes courage and faith. And I think for science in particular, engaging with people who represent religion, it becomes even more important to have those conversations and to have respect. I think there's also a lack of respect between people, which is kind of like a protective zone. But also back to Islam, our morals, our ethics, are the khuluq, right? Which is how we behave with our fellow people. In the end, what is a Muslim? It's somebody who believes there's one God and the Prophet Muhammad and all the other prophets are messengers. But how do we manifest that and how we deal in our everyday relations with our fellow human beings, regardless what is their background, what is their religion, what is their culture? It's how we engage with them. Those are our values and our morals that we need to work on. Other than that, that's why we're open, and that's why Islam is for everyone and for every time and space. And and we accept diversity and we celebrate diversity. We celebrate pluralism. And in the end, it is between you, and nobody can tell you what to do. You can listen to multiple opinions, but in the end, what you do is what you feel right in your body and in your mind. If you've done the homework of trying to find what is the truth, but ultimately the decision you take, you will only be judged by Allah, and Allah will judge you only for your intention. How beautiful is that?
Right. And then that ultimately everything happens for a reason, right? That like with whether it's supposed to be good or bad, regardless of your intention, right? That's up to God, right? The action of it, I guess. But so that even comes back to what I think would be scientific principles too, right? That it's almost like this trial and error, right? Like you do something, you have the best of intention with it. If something bad happens, but then it comes down to those other human principles, right? Where greed, power. So how do you control someone or keep someone in line, or like, let's say, right? If you let them think for themselves sometimes, right? So if they're not thinking what you want, then they think what they want, then you can't control people, right? Or how do you govern them? You know what I mean? That like, so, because I feel like when I was, and no offense to Sunday schools, but like when I would like grow up, right? My mom made me go and it was great. You know, you learn about the 5 pillars, all of that. But then it was very much like, you don't listen to music, even though the Quran is like, the tilawat is supposed to be rhythmic and there's a science to that rhythm, right? It doesn't have to be like awful music nowadays, but there is a science to that music, right? And then, but music is haram. You can't do that. Like you can't, I mean, even just the fact of asking a question, right? That is like the fact that you ask the question is the opposite, right? That's what being told to people now, that if you question, you're questioning God. And then it's almost like, to your point, that it's changing the framework that it's okay to question God. Like, is that okay?
Oh, yes. You know? And I draw that.
Because that's science, right? That's part of science.
You know, when we say what is science, I want to say science is not rooted in modernity or the Renaissance. Science is rooted earlier than that, within the Islamic civilization, based on the framework of Islam, which is drawn from the Quran to celebrate the mind of humans, which means encourage curiosity, encourage asking questions. There's no red tape on any question. And I draw this from, in Surah Al-Baqarah, there's a verse where Abraham asks Allah, show me how you bring the dead back to life. All right. Now, this is Ibrahim, the greatest prophet, asking Allah, Allah, not his friend. It's not me and you asking a question. It's Ibrahim asking Allah. Yeah. And Allah didn't say, you can't ask that. And he said, it's fine. Okay. And he did it. So he didn't say, no, you have to believe blindly. So what if I ask you? Then I have even more right to ask. Right? If Ibrahim is allowed to ask Allah, then I have more right to ask you, me not being Ibrahim, and of course, nobody else being Allah, then we can have the right to ask. And he didn't say you have to believe blindly. He actually showed him step by step the evidence, which is scientific method. He said, you bring a bird, you cut it up, you do this, and you do that. So he's showing him physical evidence. So there's no blindly believing. It's about asking questions, doing the work. You can't just ask questions and sit in an armchair. You have to go do the work to satisfy that curiosity. So again, back to, you can't just be, oh, what about this? What about that? No, you have to be sincere in your question and are ready to do the work to find the answer to that, right? And those are the hallmarks of science. And then, so that's Abraham. So you have to ask, and if you're not a proper Muslim if you're not asking those questions. And if somebody tells you not to ask, that person, for me, if I'm sure of a scientific fact that I've worked on as a scientist, I want people to question me. And I am not afraid of any question, because that only makes my science better and makes me reach the truth. So if somebody says you can't ask a question, that person has doubts, because if you're sure, you don't mind being asked. You don't mind the questions. Taking the example
because you're
of
secure
Ibrahim
in that, right?
Exactly.
Because it comes back security. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, will people think wild, crazy ideas? Of course, we're human, right? Doesn't Allah know that? He does. But you're going to have those crazy ideas, whether somebody prevented you from asking or not. So what's better? To have them out in the open and have a conversation, have an engagement. Again, back to, we can't just hide. We need to engage. We need to talk. We need to share. And if we say something is not allowed, it's not going to go away. It's just going to go inside and fester and get even worse. Right? So no, let's put it out there and let's deal with it. Let's handle it. Let's be bold. Let's be courageous. Let's trust each other. That if a child or a teenager, or even you or me, have doubts, I'm going to trust you. You're not having doubts because you're a bad person. You have legitimate doubts. So let's have a conversation. And we learn from each other. We grow together. And why this is okay? Because in Islam, you are judged for your intention. So if who's going to, and nobody can judge me except Allah. You can't judge me for my intention. You don't know what's inside me. You can listen to what I say and do your best to answer me. But in the end, it's my intention that Allah will, and that is so beautiful because it helps us nurture trust. And the actual reason for problems in society is built on mistrust, because it starts with a little bit of mistrust and ends up like this, huge and big
like in an
problems.
instant. Yeah.
Right. Because we didn't keep that engagement going. And we know that at the level of spouses, at the partners, at the level of families, at the level of societies. It all starts with a misunderstanding, and nobody was willing to come forth and explain and say what's bothering them so that the other person can acknowledge. And that doesn't mean we have to agree on everything, right? It just means that we can listen to each other, hear each other, and then engage in a conversation with respect. And I think those are the tenets of the scientific method that made the Islamic civilization what it was in the past. And then, unfortunately, we've lost that for multiple reasons, which we could talk about in another, time or space. But today, we need to kind of revolutionize how we perceive what are the tenets of Islam and reclaim them for what they are, celebrating the mind, being the origin of the scientific method, engagement, communication, and learning and respecting and trusting each other.
Right. No, and it's so funny that you say that way, because the problem then isn't even the person. Well, I mean, it is the person, but it's more the in-between space, right? Like it's, whether someone's flawed or whether they aren't, right? But it's that in-between, like you're saying, that communication, because there are people that can't be trusted, right? Like as much as we want to say, hey, let's all trust everybody, obviously, monafics throughout history, right? Even for the prophet's time. But, and maybe it's not even, I'm just trying to, because I guess the thing I'm just thinking is that because a lot of times people say, well, the science is wrong as if the person's wrong, right? And then, but that's not even the part. It's almost just like the method of it, right? That like, what methodology are you using? And the same way you could use one methodology to study something and get a wrong conclusion, that doesn't mean science was wrong or that the human was wrong. It's just the way you went about your life. And isn't that what religion is?
Exactly. You said it so beautifully.
Isn't that what religion? Yeah.
Absolutely. And that lens, that framework is so productive and positive and optimistic. It doesn't put the human as the center of evil, right? It says that there is a way to reclaim what is right. There's a way to learn how to do things. And that kind of saving grace is beautiful, is wonderful. It makes you want to embrace everyone. But I want to allude to the point that yes, people are, humans are on a spectrum for all the traits they have. That describes the phenotype of what is a human, right? And for every point on the spectrum, for every trait, through evolution, there's a reason, there's a benefit for the whole community, not for the individual, which really resonates with what Islam is. Islam is about community. It's not about the individual. It's how do I preserve the human community? How can we live together? It's about how we integrate and engage, how we talk to each other. So we should not adopt the individual approach. It's about adopting the community approach. And I think that is fundamental to understanding Islam, understanding nature, understanding society, understanding science, how we approach it. And so, yes, you will have people who on that spectrum are doing things that may harm other human beings. For whatever reason, there will be reasons, right? Either biological or environmental or a combination of both, as we know from research. How do you deal with it, right? So it comes from a protective lens, not a punishing lens. It's about, let me understand, back to science, let me understand why this is happening. Let me tease apart the factors. What is the biology? What is the environmental? Which ones I can control? Which ones I can't? And how do I go about helping this person, not blaming them? And the reason is not just for that person, but to protect society, right? So if there is, for example, somebody, just to give an example, who is a psychopath because a certain part of his brain is missing, right? Or
Sure.
a gene or a combination of genes are turned off or turned on, whatever. Right?
Sure.
I'm giving general statements,
Sure.
but this is something he cannot control, or she. They were born this way. So what do you do with them, right? Do you allow them, because of freedom and space, to do whatever they want? Of course not, because your lens is community. You need to protect the community from them and protect them from themselves. But that doesn't mean you're blaming them for what happens. You start thinking, how can I understand using science why this happened? Right? The biology behind it, the mechanisms. How can I heal it? If I can introduce a new chemical, a gene, turn it off, turn it on, right? Or put back, activate other parts of the brain to kind of replace whatever. So using science of that, and also treating that person humanely when you, protect society from that person. So that humane, not to punish him or her, not to isolate them, but to take care of them. So these are some ways of how Islam teaches us how to deal with the human, how to employ science, how to employ that community lens of caring, of living in harmony with nature and not isolating us from nature or claiming that there's a pinnacle of perfection. We're not. We're part of nature in its complexity, in its messiness. And that's what makes it beautiful. And that's what makes it survive. And that's what makes it elegant and a testimonial to the presence of Allah.
That's very true, yeah. Because what else is Jannah, right? But a garden, right? Isn't that what you could fear in, like nature, right? I mean, of all the things that Jannah could be, right? And then, or like God's ultimate wisdom, right?
Yeah.
Or manifestation, maybe not ultimate, but like a manifestation, right, of his wisdom on earth that we can understand.
Exactly.
That's beautiful. No, but you were talking about humanely, I don't know if it's a hadith or just one of the stories, right? That gentleman who was alcoholic, where everybody was, saying that like he's just terrible. Again, I'm totally paraphrasing and forget the specifics, but people would, again, I think abuse him verbally, that you're terrible, you're never going to get forgiven. And then the prophet, right, that you don't know what he's been through or what his intention are, that if every day he's trying to forget, he asks for forgiveness and does the same thing, the fact that he at least asks for forgiveness, right? And then is he not better than you because he's asked for forgiveness? So
exactly.
I'm adding my own thing into that, but
no, but that's okay. That's the beauty of Islam. You read into it what's good for you, right? And that's the beauty of Islam, that there's no hierarchy in Islam. It's between you and Allah. And to me, that they can't get any better. But speaking to the humane, this is the history of Islamic civilization. We had mental hospitals. We treated animals well. The international human rights was out there way before in the 40s when it came out, right? Respecting life and human life and dignity was way before. So we have a wisdom, right? And it's not just the Islamic civilization. There are other ancient cultures who had that ancient wisdom where they were in more harmony with nature. They respected humans versus what we are living today of a society that is based on capitalism, materialism, imperialism. We see it played out at its worst between what's happening today, between how Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza.
Right.
So this is like the manifestation of it. So how do we go from there, right? How do we reclaim what is true, what is right, our humanity, and what can we learn from the past, and how we can build on it for the future, right? It doesn't stop. It's a ship in the making. It's evolution, doesn't stop, right? It's not that everybody has found every answer, otherwise life would be boring. It's the beckoning of the next frontier that we want to discover together, and the awe and the beauty of trying to understand, and all the mechanisms from the atomic level or even particle level up to the astronomical level, is that what keeps the joy and the beauty of life and the spice of waking up every morning trying to find an answer, and the freshness of every new child being born, asking questions all over again to discover those that we haven't answered yet.
That's beautiful, Rhonda. I don't think there's anything else after that. we should stop here. No, watch, but beckoning to the new frontier, that's inshallah what we'll do. That's what we're going to do
together.
And celebrate that, and again, the whole spectrum, like you said, right? That everything, hard science, soft science, atomic, the astronomical, right? Just one last thing I'll say, I actually met this gentleman, I don't forget his name, but I'll insert it into the thing. But there was this conference, this House of Wisdom conference that was held in Memphis. And I'll connect you with those people for sure, that they'll be a great, partners with this, that he said that why is God hidden? That you think that, right? That you think that it's out of meanness or why he's not showing himself. That he's but he stays hidden so that you find him. And he gives you the tools and your brain to go and figure out how to find him. And I just thought that was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. It made me cry, because it's that's the nicest thing, right? A creator could do. Obviously it's rough along the way, but it is going to be rough, right? And it says throughout the Quran the whole time, I'm going to test you, right? And you're going to be tested. So to be surprised at the test, right? That's also ignorance in a way, right? That it's why are bad things happening? But I just thought it was the sweetest thing, again, a creator could do to his servant.
And you learn along the way. That's part of that journey of reflecting and learning and picking yourself up again and trying to make a better judgment next time. And that's the tawbah, right? The tawbah, it's okay to keep doing tawbah so long as you're sincere in your tawbah, right? So it's okay if you keep doing another mistake. Which also, speaking of the spectrum, this siloing of disciplines is also a factor of modernity, when things are not siloed, they're not divided. Everything is a continuum with each other, and that's the only way we can understand nature.
Yes.
If we adopt that complex framework of looking at the world rather than dividing it. Maybe at some point dividing it helped us to understand, but now it's actually an impediment to understanding and to solving the problems that we're facing today. We need to think in a more systematic, complex way to understand the problems and challenges and come up with better solutions.
Right, because if everything's linear, right, you understand pharmacology too, if A, you study A and how does it impact B, but it's all quantum. Right?
Exactly.
Because B is impacting how many things, and A has been impacted by how many things, that looking at things linearly, right, and two-dimensional, you can't understand it. And that's how we understand the world, I feel like.
Absolutely. Plus how much we don't know, right? We're only basing all our judgments on what we know, but we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And I think acknowledging that is very important, and for us not to be arrogant, which also Islam reminds us, don't be arrogant. And we will always be limited, as much as we strive, we will always be limited by our biology. And we know that as scientists, right? We are limited. We live in a 4-dimensional world. We're not going to have the 5th and 6th and 7th or even the 11th dimension. We know that through math and physics. Sure. But again, acknowledging those limitations helps us to be humble and to keep on seeking knowledge and understanding and wisdom.
Thanks, Aranda. Well, here, let me stop recording real quick.